Welcome, Victoria, to the Love Your Bod Pod. I'm so stoked to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This conversation is going to be really juicy.
I love a big juice, lots of juice.
Yeah.
So, for people who aren't familiar with you, who don't know who you are, can you just give us a little bit of a background? Tell us a little bit about your relationship with food and your body growing up. You're known as the fierce fatty online. So, essentially, how did you get there? How did you get to this place?
Yeah, so I didn't start out as fierce fatty. It was more like meek and mild, chubby, sad. That's where I started out. So I, as a kid, had a very complicated relationship with food. The lessons that I learned in my family was that fat is bad, that eating too much food is bad, and that I was greedy because I desired food, but also because we lived in poverty, we had a lack of food. And so that literal lack of food on top of feeling like I shouldn't eat food because if I did, I was greedy, made me desire food in a big way. Obviously, now I'm like, obviously, at the time I was like, what's wrong with me? Why do I want to eat food? It's bad. And because I had a bigger body, I had a bigger body as a kid, and the rest of my family doesn't really. I was like, well, I am a beast, like out of control. I'm awful. Look at this horrible body. Being fat is disgusting. And society just reinforced those messages. And so for most of my life, that's what I believed. And I did everything I could to try and become straight sized, and was successful temporarily. And then when I put weight back on, I was like, look at me. I'm such a loser. See, I'm so out of control. I can't, stop eating food for more than a second. And yeah, so eventually, after many, many years of that and many years of my low self-esteem leading me into situations which weren't good for me, for example, being homeless at 17, or being in an abusive relationship, or having shitty jobs, all that type of stuff, I just thought I deserved it. Like, being homeless, does someone like me just, is it a big deal that I'm homeless? And I've got an abusive partner. Is it a big deal? Because I am so ugly. I'm lucky to have a boyfriend. And eventually I got to a place where I thought, I need to change. There's something wrong with the way that I view myself. And I started working on that. And eventually I discovered fat positivity. And I was like, shut the fuck up. Why has no one told me about this, that it's okay to be fat? Like, what the heck? Why is this a secret? Everyone needs to know. And obviously it wasn't a secret, but I had never just, discovered it. And that was the beginning of me turning into fierce fatty.
So I'm curious thank you for sharing all of that. It sounds like you've experienced so much trauma, hardship in your life. I'm curious if when you had those moments of starting to realize that you wanted to change, or that you needed to change the way that you were relating to yourself, was that sort of like an intuitive knowing? Was it a conversation, a series of conversations? Like, I'm curious what resulted in, okay, I want to pivot, I want to change.
Yeah, so the catalyst was actually finding that the man that I was with, the man that I thought I was going to marry, had 3 other girlfriends. And I was the one, yes, I was the one that busted him. So I was with this guy. He was just, a dream, everything you could want in a partner, and he's amazing. And we had a long distance relationship. And one day I was on his laptop and I discovered something that made me go, what is this? And it turned out it was a message from one of his girlfriends. I reached out to her, said, hey, do you know this guy? She said, yeah, he's my boyfriend. I said, well, he's my boyfriend too. And then we met the same day, like an hour later. And then we found another and another. The fourth one didn't believe us. Me and the other 2, we all got together, and we became friends. Obviously we all got rid of him, but I looked at these other women and they were smart and funny and quirky and gorgeous and just really cool people. And then I looked at myself and I was like, why the hell is he with me? Because I'm fat and ugly and yeah, maybe I've got an okay personality, but really the way I look, like, and I always thought that people were being charitable by being with me. They were just so kind. And I realized that he wasn't with me because he was kind. He was a dickhead. Like he had like 50,000 other girlfriends. He was with me because he too thought that I was, you know, like these other people. He had a type. And I realized that, okay, I can objectively see that these people are wonderful people. Why can't I think like that about myself? And so that was the kind of the catalyst for me to start thinking, maybe there's not something wrong with me. Maybe there's something wrong with the way that I'm viewing myself.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Like that. It's beautiful that you got to that place and that you're able to
Yeah.
have that. Not beautiful that you were dating a man with several other ladies.
Well, it's a story. I'm like, oh, at the time it wasn't that fun, but at the time now I'm like, whoa, that was an interesting story.
Yeah, that is interesting. So I actually discovered you through your TED Talk. It's called I Am Fat, How to Be Confident and Love Your Body at Any Size. And it sounds like this is a part of that story of getting to that place. So many people who are listening, I'm assuming, really relate to you and relate to your history and how you used to feel about yourself, you know, struggling to believe that they're worthy or deserving to be confident because they look a certain way or worthy to be treated fairly. What wisdom can you share with them about how you got to this place? And, you know, what could you say to somebody who's maybe in the place where you used to be?
Yeah. So the idea that your body isn't okay is a belief. It's not fact. There's no empirical evidence to say, yep, your body is bad, or yep, you are bad, or you are greedy, or you are whatever negative thought that you have. So it's a belief, which is amazing because that means it's possible for you to change your beliefs into something that is more helpful for you. Now, if you're at a place where you don't think that your body's okay, to get to the place where it's like, where you feel like, I'm amazing. Oh my God, have you seen this? It's pretty difficult, but it can be done. And so you need to work on changing those beliefs. And the way that we do that is changing the information that our brain is getting. And that means that, you know, when you're in this kind of diet land and not thinking you're good enough, a lot of times people are watching a lot of TV shows with straight sized bodies. They're consuming a lot of social media with these images. They're around people who are dieting. Their whole life is just reinforcing those messages. And so getting the good stuff into your brain, like listening to this podcast, is going to slowly help change your beliefs so that you realize that your body's, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's not absolutely disgusting. And then maybe one day you can get to a place where you're like, you know what, this body is pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I think unfollowing people on social media is a big one. Following a wider variety of people is a huge one, 100%. Any other things that really helped you in getting confident and owning yourself and owning your body, aside from shifting the information which supported you and changing those beliefs?
Yeah, setting boundaries. I love me a nice juicy boundary. And before I was like, boundaries, fuck no. I'm never telling someone the way that I feel. I'm just going to keep it inside and secretly hate them. But when I learned how to set boundaries and realized that the power of boundaries, I was able to protect my mental health. And so when people around me started saying, oh, I need to lose weight, or oh, I need to go on a diet, and oh, I shouldn't eat this because it has 12 calories or whatever, I was able to do stuff to protect myself, either, you know, remove that person from my life, or set a beautiful boundary with them, or whatever it could look like. And that in turn made me feel so much more confident, because I realized that people love me and respect me, and if I voice what I need, people are not going to be like, fuck you, I'm not going to do this thing. Sometimes that might happen, but very, very rarely. More likely, people are going to say, yeah, of course, I'm going to, try and help you out with this task that you have of trying to love your body. And it makes you realize that, yeah, you're loved and you have power, and people are not going to just run away from you when you say, this is what I need.
Yeah, boundaries is a big one for sure.
Mm.
What if someone doesn't respect your boundaries? Then what do you do? What would you do?
Yeah, it's complicated, right? So there's something that I teach. I have a mini e-course called Boundary Boss, and there's something that I teach in there, and is what to do when that happens, and assessing whether if it's safe to set a boundary. So it might not be safe to set a boundary. Say, you know, your boss is behaving in a certain way. It might not be safe for you to do that. Or maybe you're in an abusive relationship and that might not be safe. Or maybe the person you're setting a boundary with financially supports you. And so it's complicated. But for me, because I don't have a boss, because I work for myself, yay, I don't have, I'm lucky that I'm very privileged that I have relationships that feel good for me. And so if someone does violate a boundary, then first I will just remind them, and it's not that big a deal. I'll be like, oh, hey, remember when I said about this? And they'll probably be like, oh yeah, shit, sorry. And they probably might slip up again, and you say, oh yeah, hey, remember about this? Oh yeah, oops, sorry. But then if someone is constantly violating your boundaries, and it's kind of like, hey, remember when I told you this for the 50,000th time, then you have to then decide what you're going to do with that information. So either remove that person from your life, and I've done that with many people, unfortunately, who couldn't respect boundaries, or limit my exposure to them. Say if I don't have a choice, say if they're a colleague, I maybe won't have lunch with them, or so I'll limit my exposure. I'll just decide, like, is this a deal breaker for me? And if they can't respect my boundaries, yeah, it's pretty much a deal breaker for me.
Yeah, I love that. That was very well said and very succinct and articulate. So I want to go back to your TED Talk, because I've loved it. I've watched it a gazillion times. Something you do in your TED Talk is you own being fat. And for a lot of people, that's really uncomfortable. I think fat can feel like an insult. It can feel like an attack. It can just feel, like something that they're not comfortable with that word or that idea. So what has been the impact of you owning your body size and using fat as a neutral descriptor, which is what you're on stage and you're like, fat is the neutral word I use to describe my body. What's been the impact of that? Why do you encourage people to embrace that?
You literally said the exact line from my TEDx talk. Like, how many times have you watched it? You're creepy.
I'm in stalker mode right now. I'm just fangirling. I'm a fangirl for sure.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. That word fat is so powerful. Before I reclaimed that word, if someone used that word, and if they used it describing my body, I would be devastated, because I was doing everything possible to not be seen as fat. Because the way that I understood what fat meant unattractive, lazy, greedy, slovenly, undesirable. Like, nothing good was what I thought fat was. And society has made us equate that word with those things. Even now, when I describe myself as fat, some people who don't know me, they'll be like, you're not fat, you're beautiful. And I'm like, pretty sure I'm both, thank you very much. Because they think that I'm saying, I'm so ugly, I'm so horrible, blah, blah, blah. But what I'm saying is that I have a larger body. I have a bigger body. It's the same way I say I have green eyes, or I have currently dyed blonde hair with really shitty roots. So reclaiming that word and realizing, actually, I am buying into the idea that it's bad to be fat? What if I bought into the idea that it's okay to be fat, that it's just a normal way of being as a human being, the same way as if you're tall or short or whatever. And I took that power away by claiming that word for myself. And so now it means, like, all the meaning has gone from the word. And so if someone says to me, you're fat, before that would be a dagger in my heart. And I'd be like, oh my God, that's the worst thing anyone could ever say to me. Now, if someone says that to me, I'm just like, yep, congratulations. You have perceived my body and you've got it right. I am fat. Good job. You know, it's like if someone said, well, look at you, you've got ears. Well, yeah, yep, I do, you know, and so there's no power behind it because I've reclaimed it and it's just a part of who I am. But recognizing that it is so difficult for people who haven't got to that point, because they believe that being fat is all of those things we mentioned before.
Is there any other thing that has helped you in that process of getting to this place? Like, you know, was it like relentless conviction? Was it repeating affirmations? Was it just really, you know, engaging yourself in a lot of that fat positivity and a lot of resources? Or was there something that really helped you in your process of getting to this place of seeing it as a neutral word as opposed to being that like dagger to the heart?
Yeah, so it was a lot of educating myself about why using that word is important versus using euphemisms like fluffy or chunky or even plus size. Because what the euphemisms are saying is that, like, oh, we don't really want to say it because it's impolite, and you know, we want to make this thing which is so horrible more palatable, but the thing that's so horrible isn't so horrible. And educating myself on fat activism and all of that type of stuff to realize that the definition of the word, I had got it wrong, and I'm making a new definition. Not I'm making a new definition, I'm just, you know, taking the actual definition of what it is.
I would love to track back to what you had said before when people will say, you're not fat, you're beautiful. Can you sort of dissect that statement and break down perhaps why it's triggering or problematic or continuing to perpetuate this lie that, you know, being fat is this dagger, this insult?
Yeah, so when someone says, don't say you're fat, that's not very nice, you're not fat, you're beautiful, what I hear is they have major bias against fat bodies, that the opposite of fat is beautiful. So you're not fat, you're beautiful. And so they think that fat is ugly or unattractive or bad in some way, and it's not. And so when someone says that to me, I just know that they know that I'm fat, they can see it, but they want to just brush it under the carpet, being like, no, you're not, don't say that, because I see you as a good person. Like, you're not one of those bad fat people who we don't like, you're one of the good fat people and you're beautiful. And so I need to tell you that to make me feel more comfortable, because I can't sit listening to someone say that they are unattractive, which is what they hear when they hear that word fat. So it's about kind of their comfort and also upholding their biased attitudes towards fat people.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I really get that it is about their comfort level and their biases. So what does it mean to be fat positive?
Yeah, it's just, being fat positive just means that you think it's okay to be fat, that you can see fat people and be like, wow, they're people, they're human beings, that you can see fat people and think they're probably pretty cool or not. Basically, being fat positive is wanting equal rights for fat people, for fat bodies, and not judging a person on their size, judging them for their character. So yeah, just thinking fat people are people, which is very strange, but it's true.
So I want to talk a little bit about dieting. You also, again, going back to your TED Talk, you mentioned that we have this belief that we're going to go on our next diet, and that day one exhilaration, that this one's going to be the one. It's going to be different. I'm going to transform my whole life. What can you tell us about the promises of diets and the lies of diets, and what leaving behind dieting has done for you?
Yeah, the promises and the lies of diets are intoxicating. When a few years ago, I moved out of I moved house, and I was going through old stuff, and I found this card that I had taken with me from the UK to Canada and had kept with me for years. And I found it. And this card was a card from Weight Watchers. It's a card that I bought, something that they would sell during the Weight Watchers meeting. And it was an illustration of a woman standing on scales and taking a photograph of the number on the scales. And the text said, it's important to document all of life's great moments. And at the time, I was like, oh man, that shit is so funny, because it is a great moment in life when you weigh a certain amount. And then when I saw it again a few years ago with Fat Positive Lens, I was like, what the fuck is this shit? Great moments, what you weigh, and you're taking a photograph of it. I know it's meant to be a joke, but that's fucked up, But at the time, I probably, if I had, at the time, I probably didn't have a camera phone, but I could imagine taking pictures of the scale at a number that I was pleased with, and documenting that. And obviously I did document my weight anyway, and thinking that was what life was. But then when I was my thinnest, I was so fucking miserable. I was so hungry. I was so deep in disordered eating. I was tired. All I could think about was what I could eat, how much I needed to exercise, if my boyfriend fancied me more because I had lost X amount of pounds, if my boss was like, oh my God, you're such a good employee now that you've lost X amount of pounds. And I was so boring to be around. All I'd ever talk about was food. And because obviously I was starving, and to my friends, like if they eat something, I'd be like, oh, did you know that if you ate that one instead, it has like 2 calories less. So you might as well eat the other one because it's less calorific. Like, I'm surprised I had any friends left because I was so obsessed and disordered. And so all of this, running through fields, all of that, your life is going to be great and money's going to rain down from the sky, and Brad Pitt's probably going to be blowing up your phone when you get down to a certain way, and all of this shit, like, it didn't materialize. I didn't become more confident. I didn't feel more sexy. Yes, I was proud of myself and thought that I'd done a good thing, but that was so temporary because, as we know, our bodies will do everything it can to put weight back on. And so then all of that good feelings that I had, even though there were tiny little bits of good feelings, were just put into reverse really quickly when I put weight back on. And then I just felt like a piece of shit when I put weight back on, and people would be like, oh, you've put weight back on. I'd be like, I know. And it was like I'd committed a crime and I should be deeply ashamed of myself. And so diets promised me that I would be confident and happy, and I'd be strutting down the street in, like a model on a catwalk in 6-inch heels, because I'd be like so confident, and like mini skirts and shit like that. And it's fine if you want to wear that, but I imagined like, this is my reality, is I'm going to be like this, I'm going to be a model. And that didn't happen. It just made me really sad and deepened disordered eating for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For somebody who's in this process of dieting, and they're in like a weight suppressive stage, so they are on that thinner point, and and starting to gain back the weight. And so those, maybe the compliments are going away or the comments about your body changing are happening. What would you maybe say to them to support them in continuing to maybe choose recovery or work towards recovery, or to feed themselves, not resort back to the dieting and the restriction?
Yeah. Oh, I just want to give them a big hug and be like, "You're doing it! Oh my God!" What they are doing, and what anyone who's done, is so fucking brave. It's so difficult, and it's so important as well. Uh, that having your body change, and it being, and seeing it as a good thing, because you were recovering and you were unlearning all of this toxic, inappropriate stuff. It's very difficult, because your greatest fear is happening, the thing that we all are scared of, becoming bigger and putting on weight, is happening. And to give yourself grace, just hardcore grace, self-love. Don't expect much of yourself in regards to, tearing up life and being, doing amazing things, because this thing is already so amazing and so big. And expect that you are going to be like, oh, I feel bad that I don't want to be fat. That's normal. And to have thoughts of, well, if I just, stopped eating this, and if I just, increase my exercise, then I wouldn't, I could just stop here and my weight I'd stay here. That's all normal. And instead of deciding to act on those things, just sitting in the suck and embracing the suck, and know that it's temporary. And each day is one step forward, and it's like a long marathon, and it may feel shit right now, but tomorrow you may feel better. So just kind of hang on and see what tomorrow brings, and surround yourself with good stuff like this podcast, so that you can convince your brain that it's going to be okay. And it will be. It'll be okay.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think you're also, you and your experience and your story, I think also shows people what is possible, that it is possible for you to get to a place where it isn't just the suck.
Yeah. And yeah, it's that's one thing I think with my life is, I always look back to, is everything is temporary, right? Everything is temporary. And one day you will feel a little bit better. And one day you might wake up and be like, do you know what? I feel fucking amazing today. I'm going to walk around like with some assless chaps on, and I feel great. And then the next day you might not. And it's all good. It's a part of the process.
Yeah. So speaking of like dieting, there's a lot of weight loss methods out there, tools, things that we can do that are prescribed to fat people, to larger bodied people, but then they're diagnosed as disordered eating in thin people, or as eating disorders. Can you talk about, weight stigma, fat phobia, and the impact on eating disorders and recovery, and just what your thoughts are on that?
Oh my God. So fat people can be anorexic. This is, a lot of people don't know this, because it's one of the only mental health conditions that is defined by weight, which is fucked up. Like, it's a mental health, it's mental health, and they're like, okay, well, you don't have this mental health issue because you don't weigh this amount. Like, it's so fucked up. Anyway, so there's atypical anorexia, which is anorexia for those who don't meet the weight criteria. And I'm just like eye rolling, like big time. But fat people, if you lose weight, no matter how, people are like, that is good. That is great. And if you go to, so many people have told me stories about going to the doctor and being like, I'm really struggling with food, and the doctor just being like, well, whatever you're doing, keep it up because it's working. And they have an eating disorder. And if they had come in and they had a smaller body and they had said the exact same words and said, hey, I'm struggling, the doctor would treat them totally differently. And even if you're straight size, if you're not, you could come into the same problems. But when you are in a bigger body, we are actively encouraged to do anything to lose weight. And, sometimes people are like, well, make sure you're losing weight in the healthy way. But is there a healthy way to lose weight? Is there a healthy way to starve yourself? Big question mark on that. And obviously, we know the answers to that. So it is really, really inappropriate. And so then it makes it very difficult for fat people with eating disorders, any type of eating disorder, to get the help that they so desperately need, and to be believed that they're struggling with food. And so if a fat person says, I'm not eating that much, people will be like, yeah, right, because if you weren't eating that much, you'd be really thin. And that's just not how bodies work. Oh, I could go on about this forever, but basically it's just so fucked up. Anyone in any body size can have any type of eating disorder, and everyone should be able to access care that they need.
Yeah, 100%. And that whole narrative of like, well, if you weren't really eating much, then you should be losing weight. I think that that's something that like people across the size spectrum can experience, of like, well, why am I not losing weight? Shouldn't I be losing weight? Like I'm eating less and I'm not exercising, and it just pushes you into more disorder, more restriction, more harmful behaviors to make weight loss occur. And we can pretend that it's about health all day long, but it's not really about
No,
health at that point. No.
no,
No.
no, not at all. Not at all.
Okay, so this is a heavy topic. There's a lot to unpack, but I'd love to chat about it with you and hear your opinions and your thoughts. So often you've talked about how engaging in diet culture is supporting systems of oppression, and you've linked fat phobia to white supremacy, ableism, racism, etc. How can we stop buying into these systems? What can we do to opt out and to reject them?
Yeah, so this is big, and a lot of people don't realize how different systems of oppression, how they're so intertwined and so greatly linked. And I think most people want to be good people. Most people want to be anti-racist. Most people realize that there's a lot of work that they need to do. Not everyone, obviously, because there's still lots of people who are happily bigoted. And so when we understand about how diet culture and fat phobia stems from racism, from ableism, from white supremacy, then when it comes up, it's a lot easier to be like, hell fucking no, I'm not buying into that, because supporting that is supporting racism. And so to learn more about the history of this, there's a great book by Dr. Sabrina Strings, Fearing the Black Body, Fearing, anyway, that's the title. You can Google it. And in it, talking about how enslaved people being brought across to the Americas, and at the time seeing their bodies and seeing different shapes of their bodies and saying, oh, that is bad. White people, we have this body type, therefore this is more superior. We don't want to be like those Black people who all they care about is food and fornication. And there was another F in there. So basically they are animalistic. That's all they care about. Whereas we, superior white people, we're able to control ourselves, and we're able to be better. Big quote unquotes, under this. I don't believe this, but this is what, people at the time and even now think. And obviously, many years has passed since that point, but our desire to look white, quote unquote, has not gone away, because obviously racism has not gone away. And now we don't really understand how they are linked. And so it's all to do with health. well, I don't want to be thin. I just want to be healthy. And that's super ableist as well. And so all of these other things have come into play as well as racism, healthism, you know, sexism, all sorts of things. Basically, it's all just fucked up, and we don't want to support it. Like, there's no good that comes from this. It's not coming from a positive place. So if you remember that, and you're having these kind of diety thoughts, or you're thinking, ooh, I don't like my body because it looks a bit bigger, well, those thoughts are supporting racism. And do you want to be racist? Nah, probably not. Hopefully you don't. So yeah.
Yeah, I think realizing where it came from. And Sabrina Strings has actually been on the podcast. I believe
Oh,
it's episode 88, if I remember correctly. Um, but I think realizing that it is a part of those larger systems, and how it's sort of been diluted down into this, like, oh, I just want to be healthy thing, but really understanding the roots and the intersectionality of it can be a really helpful tool to continue to engage in the work, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I don't know if you've gotten this before. This is sort of like an aside, but I recently, this has happened more and more. The amount of times of like, why do you need to bring politics into it, or why are you talking about white supremacy when you're talking about eating disorder recovery? So it's really interesting. I mean, granted, I was completely ignorant to this a year ago as well, that there was this connection, or 2 years ago. But it's really interesting to have people say, well, I wish you would just keep those things out of the conversation, when really, like, to talk about like the thinner is better narrative, to talk about fat phobia without also really talking about these systems of oppression and how they all intersect, is sort of a conversation that's lacking
Yeah.
necessary nuance.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. Um, and we cannot take the politics out of this, because it is political, and everything has so many different systems of oppression intertwined, like sewn into the fabric of our society. It's who we are. And so if we are striving to be more informed people, we need to look at what has made us and our society, and all of the ingredients that have gone in there. And so many of the ingredients are fucked up things. And
Mhm.
so, if we're like, oh, we want to bake a cake. Well, if some of the cake is like racism and sexism and healthism and transphobia and all that type of stuff, let's maybe not bake the cake, and maybe let's look for alternative ingredients, because the cake isn't that great, really.
Mhm.
So yeah, we have to look at this stuff.
Yeah, I think to fully eradicate it from society and to really shift the culture, we can't not talk about those things, because they're sort of the roots that the rest of the tree has grown from, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, those nasty trees and those nasty cakes, let's just, let's redo them, make them better.
Yes. Yes. So I'd love to know. I've been straight sized. I've been thin my whole life. I'm really passionate about fat activism and fat positivity. While I've never been impacted by it the same way that someone who is fat and in a larger body has, I've still been impacted it from my own internalized fat phobia, my own eating disorder. But I really want to expand the conversation and the reach of fat positivity. So I'd love to know from you. This is also a question that got asked in my Instagram stories of like what they would want us to talk about, is how can thin people best support fat people? How can we be better allies? How can we help in this process?
Mm, I love it. Just even asking that question just warms my heart. It just,
Hmm.
oh, it just makes me so happy. There are lots of different things that you can do. And the first thing is to recognize that you have privilege in the fact that when you speak about this stuff, you are believed. Versus if a fat person speaks about, hey, diets don't work, fat phobia is a thing, then more often than not, people are like, well, you're just saying that because you're fat and you can't lose weight. Whereas if someone who is straight size says it, then others listen. So you have so much power to be able to change things for fat people, and in turn for everyone, for straight size people too. And so just by putting into conversations with people, like with your friends, if they say something fat phobic, if it's like, oh, I should really lose weight because I don't want to be fat, just challenging them and saying, why? What's wrong with being fat? If there's kind of wellness programs at work of, you know, hey, let's everyone lose loads of weight and, you know, do this stuff. Emailing HR and saying, hey, this is not appropriate and this is why it's not appropriate. It's those little things that you can do which will change the world. It's using language like the word fat, bigger bodied, larger bodied. And when people say, don't say that, that's rude, saying, well, actually, it's not, because it's okay to be fat and fat is a neutral descriptor. So it's being an advocate for fat people even when there's no fat people around. And if I was in the presence of a straight size person and they shut down some fat phobia, I would fall in love with them and force them to be my best friend forever. Like, it's so fucking badass. Like, I would just do a shit on the spot from excitement. Like, it's really cool. So if you can do even one little thing like that, like, it's world changing. Really, it is.
That is really interesting about what you had said about being a thin person. People are more likely to believe you, that you don't have some personal vendetta or you're just making some excuse about why diets didn't work for you. I remember in Abigail Segui's book, she's a professor here at UCLA. Her book's called What's Wrong with Fat. She literally like says that in the very beginning of the book. People are like, why are you talking about this? Why are you, why is this an area of study you want to explore? And she says, I know that people are more likely to listen to me because I'm a thin person. And you're right, they're with that privilege.
Yeah. And also recognizing that it's totally fucked up that, fat people are not listened to, and that we have to have allies that speak on our behalf, because, we wouldn't make as much progress if we didn't. And I think it's a big reason why Dr. Lindo Bacon's Health at Every Size really took off, with them being straight sized. It's a lot more palatable for people. Even for me, when I first got into it and read Health at Every Size, and I'm like, well, okay, Lindo is straight size, therefore it's okay. Whereas I don't know if it was written by a fat person, if I would have read it or taken it seriously, even me as a fat person at that time.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that and being so like upfront about it. But it's real. And I think if having it be more palatable is what gets people's foot in the door, or is what allows them to be more open-minded, it's kind of like, okay, got it. Like, so be it,
Yeah,
exactly. if that's what needs to happen, then okay, that's what we're working with,
Yeah, exactly. So love me some straight size allies. Come on in. We love you.
Yeah. So I'd love to ask you one question separate from what we've been talking about today, but what are you most excited about in life right now?
What I'm most excited about is today, actually, after this interview, I'm going to go to my new apartment that I'm moving into, and hopefully the internet has been turned on. And so I'll be living in a really cool, busy place, and it's going to be lots of fun. So that is what I'm most excited about. And tonight, my dog has been away for the last month, and he's coming back, and there's gonna be a new apartment, and I'm gonna like hide somewhere and see if he can find me, and I'm so excited about it, and I'm gonna film it. So yeah.
Nice. Congrats on the new pad, the new house. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Victoria, this has been fantastic. I've loved getting to chat with you. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom. Where can people find you if they want to learn more? Obviously, I'll link to your TED Talk, obviously. But what are you working on? If people want to learn more from you, work with you, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can find me everywhere as Fierce Fatty. My website's Fierce Fatty. I have a book called Fierce Fatty, and my podcast is called Fierce Fatty. And I have free resources on my website. One that I think could be very helpful is called the Fierce Fatty Body Love Roadmap. It's the very first thing when you go on the website that you'll see, and it gives you that how to get from A to B, how to get from meek and mild to courageous and confident, and loving your body. And even if you're not fat, it's, you know, the same stuff applies too. So that's free. Go check it out on my website.
Awesome. We'll leave all of the links to that. Thank you, Victoria, for being here.
Thank you. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much for listening to the Love Your Bod Pod. I hope you got so much value out of this episode with Vinny, previously known as Victoria Welsby. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on another value-packed episode of the Love Your Bod Pod.